All right, everybody, welcome back to Franchise This. This is a podcast designed for emerging brands, early stage franchisors who are building from the ground up, hosted by me, Sean McKay. We're going to dive into some real stories from franchise owners, starting today with my guest, Dan Creed, Coach Dan Creed. He has spent decades working with businesses, owners, executives, leadership teams all across the world. He's no BS. He's been in the trenches. It's not theory. He doesn't teach or coach from slides or slogans. This man knows what's going on, and he's the author of a best-selling book, Champions Never Make Cold Calls, and the founder of Focal Point Business Coaching of Arizona. Don't let the name fool you. He coaches all across the world. He's logged over 15,000 hours coaching, and he's a 7-time Brian Tracy Award winner for sales excellence. Welcome to the show, Dan.
Thank you very much, Sean. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you for coming. Yes. So with such an expert on my show, I'm always nervous to ask specific questions because I kind of just want you to go where the world takes you. But
ask me anything.
I'd love to start with just, how I know your journey is wide and windy, but how you got into franchising specifically.
Well, yeah, it's a long story, so I won't bore everybody with that. But I was born and raised in a small town in southern Kansas. And I say small, 150 people for the last 100 years. I don't know how long it was, but I was raised on a farm. I was a farm boy and knew I couldn't do that the rest of my life. My family's still on the farm, but I walked out of the farm into a radio station and spent almost 18 years in broadcast, where I learned sales and marketing. And
I would have never guessed you liked radio with all these
with all the microphones. Yeah, I started a very small radio station and ended up at maybe the world's largest country music station. And I worked agencies and street sales and all of that. And then it got a little squirrely with governmental regulations and such. And then in the 80s, I had the chance to walk into my first entrepreneurial startup. And that was back then, as we were discussing, back then we didn't even know how to spell entrepreneur back then. And, but it was so exciting. And we created a couple of products that are still around that changed the world. And it was, to me, it was exciting. It was risky. It was dangerous. It was fun. It was like, just holy cow, this was great. And I just loved the entrepreneurship side of it and learning that and the creativity of it, which is part of why you would want to buy a franchise, to get out there and make things happen. And so, long story short, the reason I don't have any hair is I did 15 startups with the idea. I participated in them or did them for myself, or was with a group of guys, and we did 15 startups. And I'm now up to 17, but that's just in the last couple of years. But we really learned a lot about business and street fighting. So when I became a coach, my perspective is quite different than a lot of people who call themselves a business coach, in that my whole perspective is not a 3-ring binder and, golly, let's start here and go here no matter what your needs are. Mine is, let's get down and get dirty, because I've spent my whole life in the trenches, in the back alleys of business, learning it. And Sean, I've been in the biggest boardrooms in the world. I've worked with clients that are $400 billion, and I've worked with guys who own shoe stores, and I still love working with both. But it's all about, how do you be successful at business in anything you do? And I was starting my coaching business, and I was kind of decided that, and it's kind of a long story how I decided to go into business coaching, but there's a long story, so I was working on it. I wrote a business plan, which I'll mention here again in a minute. And I was sitting here working on curriculum and the plan and laying it all out. And my wife came in one day and said, there are franchises who do this. And we dug into it, and there was about 14 at the time who said they did some form of coaching. And I did a lot of research, and I knew what I wanted with coaching. And again, that's the cool thing about franchises. There's so many out there. You really need to take time to focus on what's right for you and what do you want out of it. That's my number one question when I'm talking to people who want to be a franchisee. And I've been on the franchisor side. And the whole key is if you're want to be a franchisee of something, if somebody that you're working with hasn't said what you want out of it, you need to run. You need to just leave, because I knew what I wanted out of it. I knew the kind of income I wanted, and I knew that I wanted to work one-on-one with people. I didn't want to facilitate. I didn't want to do group meetings. For me, I want to do one-on-one, look you in the eye and say, let's figure this out together. Let's take this challenge we have and make it successful. That's what I wanted. And at the time, there were only 2 companies who did that out of that group of 14 franchises. And the second thing I did that I'd urge everybody to do is make a list of questions and beat them up. If you're going to
interview the franchise, right?
If you're going to spend $40,000 to $200,000 or more, you better come with questions.
Yeah.
And I had 14 questions that I sat down and I called and I wore them out. The 2 that I did, I would call, and the lady answering the phone would say, "Hello, Mr. Cree. I know it's you. We recognize the number because you call so much. Who do you want to talk to?" But interview them, ask them questions. And some of my questions, and if you want, I can provide those questions because I still use them in other ways.
That would be awesome. Yeah,
I'm
sure others.
But they were like, if I'm going to buy a brand, sell me your brand. What are you doing with it? What are the territory restrictions? What are the ongoing fees? What kind of training do you offer? What kind of training do you offer after I buy? Are there any certifications involved? There's about 14 important questions you need to ask, and if you don't, you're just call Sean and I up and just give us your money because you're just pissing it away. You are. Yeah. I mean, take your time, folks, for those listening today, and focus on it. My goal, I talk to a lot of people who want to be franchisees. They call me up for particularly coaching franchises, but other things too. And my first thing is always, what do you want out of it? And, and I always say, always ask, what kind of training do you offer?
Right.
Because there's a lot of franchises out there that, will give you the pitch. And once you give them money, some of them are fabulous with training and how to sell the product and size, shape, and color and concept and skills and that kind of stuff. But some of them suck.
Yeah. You just get a manual. It's good luck, right?
Oh my gosh. And particularly, Sean, the one issue that I see a lot is that people that coming out of corporate to say, I want to own my own business, or, they come from an industry their whole lives that haven't required them to know a lot about business. They and the number one thing they don't know is how to sell something.
Right. Yeah. They haven't been in a sales role before, and it's required in any.
And I don't know a franchise in the world that you could buy that you don't have to know how to sell something.
Yeah.
And if you don't like that, don't do it.
My dad used to tell me that that selling is just a crucial part of everyday life. You're selling in your relationships.
Well, it is.
You're selling all the time, and I think that's important to recognize. It's not some grimy, scummy thing that you only do when you're trying to manipulate people. It's part of life. It's part of interaction and socialization.
I just got back from Ireland, where I was coaching. I was doing a keynote speech for all the coaches in the nation of Ireland, and that was one of the things we talked about. If you think it's what you call it, a scummy industry, it's a business, I said, you're wrong. And somebody challenged me, and I said, look, let me ask you this: have you ever asked for a raise?
Yeah, you sold.
Have you ever
asked anybody on a date?
Well, yeah, or even farther than that. Have you ever tried to kiss a pretty girl or a handsome boy? Have you ever negotiated for a car? Have you ever went to school to talk to your teachers for your kids? You've sold. So get over it. Mm-hmm. Learn how to sell something, and don't, because it's a requirement. I see lots of, because look, franchising isn't for everybody. A lot of the people who fail in franchising just fail because, one, they didn't have a work ethic, and two, they didn't know how to sell.
Yep.
So I got in. That's how I got into it. I found a very, very good franchise, Focal Point Business Coaching International. They answered all the questions. They won on all 14 questions. But the point is, look, I see a franchise as being something that when I buy it, it's my business. I'm not buying a job.
Right.
It's my business to build. So if the franchise doesn't provide some training I need, it's my job to go out and find the training. If you're not good at sales and they don't teach you sales, go out and go to a course.
Augmented.
Go learn.
Yeah.
Go learn that.
Well, because your money's on the line. I mean,
oh,
yeah.
What
else are you going to do?
If your business goes belly up for whatever reasons, who's going to lose all that money? Not the franchise.
Yeah.
But most of them that I've seen are very good and they're concerned and everything else. But look, it's up to you if you're a franchisee. It's up to you when you select this, what feels good, what is something you want to do, where somebody can give you the tools to help you be successful. Because I see a great franchisor as somebody is somebody that is a fabulous support mechanism. They're a fabulous support mechanism. I've had people go, well, I'm going to find out if they'll bring me customers. Well, no, wait a minute. That's not their job in all cases. Sometimes nationally, you donate money to advertising and that kind of thing. But, finding customers is
that's
whether
on you.
is whether you greet them when they walk in the door. There's a pretty good sub sandwich franchise that I know of. I just in yesterday. And I just expect when I walk in the door, somebody goes, hey, welcome. I hope you're having a good day. And then they keep making sandwiches. That's one of the reasons I go back there versus the other 10 down the street. So
I used to like Moe's. Welcome to Moe's.
Oh yeah. So anyway, that's an 8-minute diatribe on how I got into franchising, but I've been involved in it. I've also coached franchisors. I've coached franchisees. I've worked with a lot of franchise brokers that I know. And so I've been all over the industry and kind of, I got a pretty good idea what to look for. And so when somebody's thinking about buying a franchise, I welcome it when somebody calls me up, and particularly the coaching franchises. And I said, look, I'm going to help you make a better decision for you and your family. I'm not going to sell you. I'm going to help you make the best decision. And those are some of the things that I look at.
That's awesome. That's excellent. Yeah. And I mean, it's obvious that you don't just train people or coach people from a booklet, from even the process guide that I'm sure the franchise gives you. It's obvious that you still, work with people individually.
Did you ever see the old movie, Rodney Dangerfield movie, Back to School?
No.
You need to watch it. There's a great scene in there where he's a multimillionaire that decides to go back to college because he never got his degree. And so he goes back to college, and him and Sam Kinison, the famous comedian that screamed all the time.
Yeah.
He's a economics professor. And Rodney's in there and he goes, now we're going to do this and we're going to do this. And the text says this. And Rodney goes, nah, that's not what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to go do this, this, and this. They get this big argument, but that's the way the real world is. I've spoken at a lot of major universities and business schools. And the one message I always have that they don't always like is that, gosh, I honor anybody who's went through that process and got their MBA and worked hard and done this. But you know what? Your education only begins once you graduate. Because if you think that is going to get you a big time job, you're wrong. You're wrong.
Yeah.
You need to study. You need to go out there and work. If you buy a franchise, back to that, if you buy a franchise, people, and you were famous or whatever, people aren't going to run to you and kiss your shoes when you tell them, I bought a franchise. I want to, they're not going to run to you and buy from you because of that.
Right.
They're not.
Right.
You're going to have to work for it. you're going to have to. I work with one franchisee. It was a food franchise, and we came up with the idea. At noon, instead of him sitting down and having lunch, he did little cards, and he walked around the shopping center handing out cards to people leaving the grocery store, say, come by for a free bag of chips and a sandwich. But that's the kind of stuff you have to do. You have to be creative. You can't just buy the franchise and then wait for the phone to ring.
Yeah.
Or sit in the store and go, where's everybody? You can't do that. It requires
unless you have a McDonald's, maybe.
Yeah, but even at that, you can run a McDonald's badly, poorly.
Yes, you can.
You can. I mean, you can run off employees, and you can always tell when there's a bad manager, because it looks like when you go in the store, they take anybody that they can get versus training and bringing people in. And I always say with any business, your first job is to acquire good people to work and customers. But your second job that nobody talks about is to retain those people, to retain employees, to retain customers that come back every day, every week, they for years and years. But most people forget about the second part of that equation. And they even forget about the first part, acquiring good employees. They just take whoever comes in and applies.
Yeah.
And as a franchisee, the franchisors don't always teach you how to hire.
Yeah.
So it's all asking the questions, I think.
Yeah, I think there's some skills that you got to come to the table with or quickly learn. So I think that's a good point. Not everybody is born ready to own a franchise. So I think it's good to sit back and reflect on your own skills and abilities before you jump into a $100,000 investment.
Yeah. Can I tell you a quick story?
Please do.
I had a guy that bought a franchise. He spent $120,000 for it. And he hired me to coach him, help him build this up and roll out. And he just wasn't going anywhere. And a lot of it, he wasn't doing what we agreed to do. And it was a franchise where you had to directly deal with people. In some cases, you had to sell advertising door to door, business to business kind of thing. And I sat him down one day and I said, we need to have a serious conversation here. I said, what is going on that you can't seem to get any sales going? Well, I don't know. And I go, well, tell me about, how you feel about, going about the process. And he goes, and dealing with people. And he goes, well, that's pretty easy. And I go, what? He goes, I don't like people. I swear, I've heard that twice, Sean, in my career. He goes, I don't like people. I went, yeah. He goes, no, I don't like dealing with people. I just hate them. I go, wait a minute. You just spent $120,000 on a franchise that required you to go nose to nose, toe to toe with people. Ask them to spend money on advertising and he goes, yeah, but I hate people. It might show.
Oh my gosh.
And I said, this is what I said. I said, look, we're going to shift some things around now. Instead of me helping you grow this business, I think you ought to use me to help you sell the business.
Yeah, this ain't right for you.
Because if you have that attitude, we need to go out and sell it as fast as we can.
Before you burn it all to the ground. Yeah.
Which means we need to do a few things. You need to go out and like people for a little bit just so we can get it set up so we can sell it.
Yeah.
And 4 months later, that's what we did. But my point on that is understand what your comfort is, what's required of the business, what it would require of your comfort zone if you have to be pushed out of it. And are you okay with being pushed out of your comfort zone? If you're not okay with it, if it requires certain things that you don't like, think twice. Is that the right one for you?
Yeah. Yeah. There's lots of franchises out there. Maybe they all don't require that same sacrifice for you. Right.
Yep. Yeah. And unfortunately, you have to, there's absolutely some fabulous franchisors out there. Fabulous. And I know a lot of them. There's some great ones, but there's, like it or not, there's still some out there that if you have a beating heart, they'll take your money.
We've talked about that a lot on this show, actually. Yeah. And, speaking to franchisors, I think a lot of them are, eager in the very beginning to sell to whomever will buy. They're like, their attitude is, well, I've invested so much, I need to start recouping some of this money. And I've talked to coaches about this too, and consultants, and I think the general advice is like, from the franchisor's perspective, is be just as picky as they're going to be. If they're going to come with 14 questions, you should come with 14 questions, because your franchise is not right for everybody, and you hold the cookie. At least that's how we go talking to franchisors.
Well, I was actually we were talking before we started today. I actually talked to a couple that wanted to buy a franchise. And I said, tell me about your experience so far. And they said, well, it's not always been good. And I said, well, tell me about that. And they said, we had an interview, a discovery day with one, and they started out by giving us a list of the 14 questions we couldn't ask, that they wouldn't allow asked.
Questions you couldn't ask.
Yeah. And I said,
never heard that before.
I said, I have an opinion on that, but what did you think? And they said, well, our attorney was with us when we were doing this, and our attorney said, after like 3 questions you can't ask us, I think I walk away. That they actually said, we'll talk about anything except these questions.
That's so bizarre.
I don't know what was behind it or anything, but look, you're right. There's some fabulous ones. Find a fabulous one. Find one that will take care of you, that will support you, that'll be there. And find the things you'd like to do. Explore a lot of the different things. There might be something you don't even know about that you would enjoy doing, because there's some cool ones. And I have a friend who just bought a franchise for home health care, and it just loves it. Wasn't anything he even thought about. Yeah. And he loves it. I have another friend who got in that same field and just sold. He had like 6 homes, and he sold them all and did really well. Because that's the idea. Build a business, sell it later if you want, or pass it on. But look, if I don't, I'm sure you got a list of questions, but I'm rolling now. So
no, this is great.
So the one thing, I have a friend that he and I we were doing Shark Tank like events before the TV show. And so we learned a lot with that. We had a lot of angel investors and franchisors and that kind of thing that would come in, and we'd have as many as 40 to 60 pitches in a day and that whole thing. But here's what I tell franchise people want to be a franchisee and a franchise, and even franchise people want to build a franchise. I say, look, there's 2 or 3 requirements you have to have. You have to have. And you can ask this of a franchisor or if you're a franchisee. One is write a business plan. If you buy a franchise, write a business plan, because that forces you to ask some questions that you never thought of otherwise. And what you start with, particularly if you're starting a business, that what you start with many times, it can change completely by the time you finish your business plan.
Yeah.
The second thing is, how much of your own money do you have in it? Are you planning to put in it, or do you have in it? Because that makes a big difference if you're toying with bank money or Aunt Mabel's money or your own money.
Yeah.
On the attention, like it or not, on the attention you put towards it. And the third is, if you're asking a franchisor, tell me about your success stories. Is it a proven concept? How many franchisees do you lose every year?
Yeah.
How many do you add every year? Because that's all in the federal disclosure documents. Ask those questions. It doesn't mean you shouldn't buy it, but ask the questions.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just talking with a consultant who said, it can be a red flag for funding purposes anyway, that if a franchise loses or has several failures off of their first 25 units. And so if you're looking at an emerging brand that has less than 25 units and they've lost 2 or 3 or 5 franchisees, you might start to ask some questions. It doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. Maybe they just picked the wrong people and they got them out of the business network. But maybe there's some other things at play.
And don't get me wrong, if you're a franchisor listening to this, when I say some things I've said, but because look, who are we to say that somebody won't have the gumption to get out and make this happen?
Right.
I'm not one to say this, you can't do this, Sean.
You can't. Yeah.
So when I say they'll take their money, yeah, I don't really blame them sometimes, because who am I to say you can't if you put the effort into it, if you put the work into it? I'm telling you, the two or three, and I'll think of some more. Number one reasons why people fail in franchising is, one, they don't have a work ethic. And I mean that. They don't have they might not be the most talented people in the world, but they got a strong work ethic. You'll win every time.
Yeah. If you're willing to just put the time in and the effort and learn, then talent doesn't matter. The soft skills.
Work ethic and what you just said. Two, they have to have a burning desire to learn.
Yeah.
And three, they have to be able to sell.
Sales. Yeah.
Now, let me also add one in here that I doubt anybody's ever said in your program. But I also find that about 50% of the people that I've dealt with that have failed or are struggling, there's an element here that most people don't think about. And this should be on the franchisor's shoulders too, a little bit. But they don't, let me say it and then I'll explain it. They don't honor their past. Now, what I mean by that is that a lot of people buying a franchise have been in corporate or something for 20 years or 30 years, or own their own business. Now they want to buy a franchise, and they're failing, because I get a lot of calls from people I don't even know, and they say, "Oh, I'm failing, and I was a big shot, and in business before I did this, and I don't understand." And I said, "Well, I had a guy just last week, and I said, so why do you think you're failing?" He goes, "Well, I've never done this before, and I've got to learn how to do it." I go, whoa, 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 whoa. And I'll give you a very specific example. I had this guy explain to me his past, and this guy was a senior supply chain expert. He traveled all over the world. He dealt with HR companies and small and large companies, and he did training and all this stuff. And so I said, just verify that I understand what you said. I'll just say yes or no. And he goes, yes, 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 yes. And I said, okay, stop. Look me in the eye and tell me you didn't learn something about business and people and all that things you did and all your successes and failures that you could have used in your business. Yeah. And I thought the guy was going to vomit. He was just like, oh, and I said, look, you're in this new business. You spent the money on this franchise, but you've got all this life experience behind you on how to deal with people and how to sell and how to negotiate and how to, if you could see over here, Sean, I've got over 2,000 books. If I didn't know it, I learned it. Yeah. I've got cassettes over here still that I used to listen to. You might have to explain to your listeners what a cassette is, but
maybe so. Yeah.
But you've got to be willing to learn and learn from, failures, learn from your successes, and then translate that. Biblically, the Bible is mostly parables. We talked a little about that. It's stories. So draw from your experience and turn it into usage in managing people, in cutting deals with suppliers, in dealing with the franchisor, and negotiating things. But you've got all this experience here that most people walk away, don't use.
So you think this is very interesting. I want to make sure I understand. A lot of people you see go into the franchise and they assume they're just going to throw away all that old experience and just try to follow what this book says they should do.
Exactly.
The franchise manuals. And then they end up just as a robot or a cog in the machine, not wildly successful because they're really not putting themselves into it. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah. And again, I think a good franchisor, and I used this term earlier, will provide the size, shape, and color. The rest of it has to come from your life experience, dealing with people and, and how to run a business. Maybe, this couple I talked to yesterday, they had been, one was in higher education. The other one, great, fabulous people. And the other one was an independent business owner, but they didn't really know how a business ran. Yeah. But a franchise, most franchises will say, here's our product. Here's what you're selling. Here's how the brick and mortar looks. Here's rules, regulations. We've got this and this and this. But if you're buying a business, unless you're paying for them to come in and run it for you, which will never happen, I suppose, you've still got to draw. Some of this education thing is self-imposed.
Yeah.
I mean, you got to say, man, I don't know how to negotiate. I better take a negotiation class. I don't know how to hire people well. Now, I know some franchises will give that kind of training. Here's the type of person we want to hire, the best kind of we want to hire, but a lot of them don't. So some of this, if you don't know, and even
still, like being able to see that in the interview room is a skill that you have to learn.
Absolutely, because that is on your shoulders because you're building a business.
Yeah,
you paid a lot of money to get the size, shape, and color. It's up to you to run the business well.
Yeah.
I'm sure people that buy a franchise and they're fabulous people, big personalities, everything else. And people are total jerks.
Yeah.
And they think, well, I bought the franchise with a big name. I'll still be a jerk, and I'll build this big business. It doesn't work that way. I call it in my coaching. I teach, I've got a whole curriculum that I teach on learning personality profiling and how to adapt to your environment.
Man, that brings me back, man. I feel like when I was a kid, my dad taught me those skills. Look around you, notice the people, notice what they're. Yeah.
It's probably learning the science called psychometric profiling. Mm-hmm. That's really how to read people. There's 4 primary personalities. Goes back thousands of years. Has been registered. And if you just take a course and learn it, and because you can now see if you see somebody that you don't get along with, say, oh, he's a jerk. Once you learn this, you can always say, I can tell you I've never met any more jerks. I just say, I know what their profile is. I know how to deal with them. But that's something you've got to learn.
I think just calling someone a jerk is just a cop out, right?
Well, the ultimate thing that you've got to get away from is, I always know that if somebody's trying to be a franchisee will never work if I hear from them say, well, I am who I am, and if you don't like it, screw you.
Yeah.
Because that means they're not going to adapt to troublesome customers, to customers with problems, customers with issues. And I love this. I'm always looking for examples. I don't know whether they still do it or not, but a lot of us have heard of the company Zappos.
Of course.
The shoe company. One of the things they used to do, and I'm going to have to see if they still do it or not, but if you came in as the new CEO or just front desk lady, they made you spend a month in the call center.
Picking up the phones. Yeah.
And at the end of that month, they offered you, I don't know what it was, like $2,500 to quit. Because if you didn't like listening to people complain or listen to their issues or stuff, they didn't want you in the company. But how cool is that? I mean, that's
super cool.
And that probably saves them tens of millions of dollars a year from having people come in or jerks and run off customers. Because if you really get in that customer thing, and I'll stop here because I really get into this. But if you look at the lifetime value of a customer, you run off one customer, you can go, well, yeah, so what? But what if that one customer was bringing in their club once a month and bringing in all their kids once a week and the lifetime value of that customer buying ice cream could be tens of thousands of dollars.
Not to mention the word of mouth, and especially the word of mouth are going to spread negatively to you once you piss them off.
Oh, well, yeah.
The cost.
Look, it all ties to running a successful franchise.
Mm.
All those things tie in there. You understand what you're getting into, first of all. But again, I come back to you've got to be willing to work. I think the McDonald's franchise, I think they still, like a lot of them, they still require you, if you spend all the money and come in to buy a store, if you ever could, they still require that person with all the money to come and run the fryer. You have to learn all the positions, all the jobs. You have to go work.
Yeah. I think the key point here is owning a franchise is owning a business. And it sounds obvious to say that, but I think it's an important message that so many people misunderstand. And
Well, that's my message. That's my message all the time. I mean, I'm lucky to be with a fabulous one, international, continuous growth, one of the biggest, is the biggest in the world, I think, in this niche. But I'm telling you, you've got to look at it. You're not buying a job, and I know franchisees who think they're buying a job, and they're not.
Right.
They're buying a business, and it's your business. And the franchise is there to help you and support you. If you should buy in, and they do, take everything you can get. If they don't, beat them up, wear them out. I want this, and don't be afraid to do that. I need some training. I need some help. I need some advertising. I need some focus. I need new products. I need, that's why you paid the money, because you're buying a brand, and behind
that's supposed to support you. Yeah.
And that brand should have support behind it.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, it's like you go to Kentucky Fried Chicken, you expect to get good, crispy chicken that's hot, right? But if you go in there and it's cold and looks like they reheated it from the day before, that brand won't mean anything because of how they do it, or they start shipping you frozen stuff or what. I mean, it's your business. So you need to put your heart and soul and blood into your business, and knowing that you're supported by this organization on whatever it is. That makes sense?
Makes perfect sense. It's almost too obvious, Dan.
Sometimes, but that's the key to the coaching that I try to do, is
smacks you right in the teeth, right?
You can't sugarcoat it. Hey, man. I mean, don't hire me to kiss your rear end and tell you you're doing, everything hunky dory, because that's not my job. My job is to hold you accountable. My job is to believe in you. My job is to support you. My job is to help us make better decisions.
Find an opportunity to get better. I mean, if I hired a coach and they told me everything I was doing was perfect, what a waste of time and money that was, right?
Well, just 30 seconds on that topic. If first of all, I suggest for every franchisor, they ought to have a good business coach helping them create the value. A franchisee, spend the money, hire a good coach. It's the same kind of questions. Ask all the questions, but hire somebody who's had experience, kind of like mine, that has had street fighting in the trenches kind of experience in doing this. And it will more. I told a guy the other day, they said, well, your rates are kind of expensive. I go, what do you really, I looked at him and I said, what do you care if together we can 20X your business? What do you really care? And that's the way it should be with anybody. But look, find somebody that really knows and will challenge you and hold you accountable. That's probably I'm up to 3 or 4 things that makes a difference today. Understanding selling, that, but is that you have to have somebody, if the franchise or doesn't do it, you've got to have somebody to hold your butt accountable.
Right. Yep.
I don't want to hear excuses why your business is failing. Because I've heard people blame, the franchise. I've heard them blame the governor. I've heard them blame the Channel 6 weather guy. I've heard them blame everybody except themselves.
Yeah.
Take some responsibility, but have somebody behind you that's going, hey, what's going on? We agreed to do this and we didn't do it. What's going on? I mean, you've got to have somebody to hug you and be there to support you, and they have your back all the time. And even if it's not a coach, you really need somebody to challenge you and hold you accountable. Everybody needs that. And particularly if you're going in business, because going in business for yourself is not easy. And that's one great thing about a franchise. A good one will be there, have your back, hopefully.
Yes, indeed. That's awesome. Thank you, Dan. I appreciate that. I have one last question for you.
Hit me.
All right. If all of your content that you ever produced, including all your music, was erased, and you had only the next,
oh my God,
you didn't exist, right? And you had the next 60 seconds, to tell the world a message, what would it be?
Wow. Well, one would be believe in yourself, because if you don't, no one else will. I believe that success today is a series of eight emotional triggers. And they are things like you've got to act confident. You don't have to be, but you have to act confident. You have to look confident. You have to set confident. You have to walk in the room confident. If you're going to go to a banker, you don't want to go, you don't want to loan me money, do you? I mean, you've got, life is about perceptions. And so I'd say, what is your perception? Think about it. Are you perceived as cocky and a jerk? Are you perceived as a nice guy? You're perceived as a weenie? What are you perceived as? Because you can work on those things, because it doesn't cost you anything to speak. One of the 8 emotional triggers I say is speaking positive words. Like, instead of saying, let's give it a try. If somebody's going to buy a franchise and they say, well, we'll give it a try, I go, don't spend your money, because giving
trying
a try
is
means,
lying.
Yeah. I mean, you've got to say, yes, we're going to do it. I mean, I've been very successful and blessed with what I do, because I never say, let's give it a try. Let's see what happens. I'm going, yes, we're going to do that. We will make it happen. We are making it happen. There's a difference in mindset today. I think there's 2 mindsets. One mindset is that of possibilities, and the other one is survival. And our world isn't easy right now. There's so much crud going on in this world, and negativity and everything else. If you sat and listened to it all day, you'd be a blubbering idiot. I'm not kidding. And some people are. But, you've got to live life with a possibility mindset. The one fact that's out there forever and ever is, in the worst economy and the worst situations and the worst world situations in history, and since 1900, there's been about 5 of those eras. There's also where people were jumping off of buildings and, oh my God, the world is falling, sky is falling. The same period, in every one of those periods, there's been more millionaires made in that time than any other time in history. You know why? Because while everybody was thinking survival, they were thinking possibilities. In 2020, 21, and 22, they were my 3 biggest years I've had as coaching. When everybody's going, oh my gosh, I was going, in 100, I will also be proud, I brag on my customers, 100% of my customers had growth in those 3 years, 100%, because I wouldn't let them think negative. So that's right, 60 seconds there. But look, possibility thinking versus survival thinking. And I can find out if you're survival thinking or not by saying, hey, Sean, how you doing? Oh, I'm just getting by. Mm-hmm. Oh, we're making it. I had a guy tell me one time, we were going to write goals. And I said, do you have goals? By the way, 97% of our society has no written goals. And Oxfam, the group in Europe, says that the 2 to 3% that does have written goals controls 90% of all revenue, income.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a big number. Anyway, I asked this guy, you have goals? Oh, yeah, I have goals. And I said, what's your goal? I swear, Sean, this guy, but this is a proof of survival thinking. He goes, oh, yeah, I get up in the morning, and he goes through this whole, I shower, and I'm thinking about my goal, and I eat, and I'm thinking about my goal, and I go to work. I open up my business thing. I said, what is this goal? He goes, my goal, I think about all the time, is to go to work and break even. And I said, what? Now, keep in mind, back to franchise, a lot of franchisors will we'll set some of your goals for you from that item.
Yeah.
They'll say you're not performing it, because now you're going to be working off of numbers and performance things and reports you have to turn in, but goal settings is set in 7 different areas. And one of those is financial and that kind of stuff. Yeah. So the rest is up to you.
Right.
But this guy went to work every day hoping to break even.
That's his big goal of the day.
You'd be amazed from my side of things.
Was it a nonprofit?
He should have been. Yeah, he wasn't profitable. But from my chair, what I see every day, sometimes it's I won't say easy, but it's easier than people think to help them turn around their business just by getting them out of, the great Zig Ziglar used to say, he called it stinking thinking. He says, you got to do a checkup from the neck up and get rid of your stinking thinking. And sometimes that is saying, well, let's just get by, we don't know whether there's going to be war or where COVID's going to kill everybody or whatever. And that's talking about what if versus dealing with what is. So that's almost 2 minutes. So I apologize. But anyway,
Dan,
that's where I'd always start. You know, it has to start here in the heart.
Here and there.
Yeah. And this 7 inches here, you know.
Yeah.
So
Dan, thank you for sharing your wisdom and experience with everybody. I'm sure there's gonna be people who want to get a hold of you. What's the best way for them to do that?
Well, you could go to my website, www.mastercoachdan.com. And there's a place you can leave a message there, or you can email me at dcreed@focalpointcoaching.com. And if you've got a business or worrying about that, I always give, based on scheduling or anything, I always give a complimentary 60-minute conversation. Never a sales pitch. It's just a conversation. If you want to take it past that, that's fine. That's up to you. But if I have time, I always try to talk to them and just give you some ideas and thoughts and help you make a better decision. And then we go from there. But yeah, you can go to my website, or I've got a strong LinkedIn presence over there. Danny Creed on LinkedIn. I've been there for quite a while. I have a regular blog post over there called No BS. And it's, thank you for the opportunity though, Sean. This is a great, great questions. And
thank you.
I had a good time.
Good. I can't wait to have you back on to share more and tell the world about your harmonica skills.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Thanks again, Dan, for coming.
You bet. Thank you so much.
Of course. Everybody, we release these episodes every week on Fridays, everywhere where you can find podcasts, including YouTube, Spotify, Apple, and more. And we're going to be releasing these clips on LinkedIn as well. So thank you again, and we'll see you on the next one. Thanks, Dan.